Hello there, welcome back to the second part of my Pizza Time App Lab tutorial. In this video, we're going to add a few extra features to our app, and we're going to start by making it have multiple user accounts. So at the moment in our code, we're only looking for user 1 and I'm hungry. In order to make your app work with multiple accounts, we're actually going to head over to the Data tab, and we're going to use this key value pairs section to add in a whole load of different usernames and passwords. So I'm going to start by adding in the one that I've already got. Now in the key box, you don't need to put quotes around the text, but in the value bit, you do. So for the password, pop quotes around it, and I'm going to put I'm hungry. And then go ahead and click add pair. And now I'm just going to quickly add a few more. There we go. So now we have 3 usernames and passwords. So let's have a look at how we now make our app look at these key value pairs when the user tries to sign in. So back to our code. Now the if statement that we've already got kind of does what we need it to, but instead of looking specifically for user 1, I need to actually look up the username that they've typed in that set of data in those key value pairs. Now we do that using the get key value block. Well, I'm going to drag this in and then put my if statement inside. Now here where it says key, this is the username that we want to look up. So again, if we have a look at the data, the keys were Garfield, Shrek, and user 1. So that's the usernames. That's what they're going to be typing in. So what I actually need to do here for the key is to get the text from the username input. And the value we get back is going to be either feed me, om nom nom, or I'm hungry. So we can now use the word value inside our if statement to mean the password that we just got back from that table. So what we need to do is check to see whether the value we got back matches the password in the password input. Stick with me. I know this sounds a little bit complicated, so let's just run through it one more time. When the user clicks the login button, we're going to get the text from the username input box. We're then going to look that up in our table of data and get a value back. We then check to see whether that value matches the password that they typed in, and if it does, then finally, inside here, we can now run some code. Now in the more advanced version of the app, I want it to actually give you some kind of feedback so that we know whether we've got the password correct or not. So I'm going to hit the little plus here so that we get an else. So now I can handle what happens if the password matches a username, what happens if it doesn't. So let's start by handling what happens if the username and password match. Well, what I actually want it to do is to change the color of the login button to green so that there's a visual change letting the user know that their login has been successful. So what I'm going to do is go to UI controls, and I'm looking for the one that says set property. And I'm going to set the property of the login button. The property I want to change is the background color, and I'm going to change it to green. I then need the screen to change to the size screen. But if I make it change to the size screen straight away, you won't actually see that button change color because it will happen instantly. It will turn green and then straight away it's going to go to the next page. So instead, what I'm going to do is actually put a slight delay. So it's going to wait for just about a second so you can see the button turn green, then change to the next screen. So to add a little delay, I'm going to use this set timeout block. So after I change the background color of the button to green, set a timeout, and this is milliseconds. So 1000 milliseconds. So this means whatever I put inside here happens after 1 second. And what I want to do is set the screen to the size screen. Okay, so let's do a quick test and make sure that this has worked. And this time I'm going to try testing one of the other usernames. So let's go for Garfield and feed me. Remember, this should look up this information in the table, find that Garfield and feed me match, and change the button to green. There we go. It waited 1 second and moved on to the change size screen. Perfect. So now let's handle what happens if it's looked up the username and password, but it hasn't matched. In other words, they've typed in a username and password that don't exist. They don't have an account with Pt2. First of all, I actually want to get rid of the text that's in username and password so that it deletes it so that they can try again. So to do that, I can use the set text property. I'm simply going to set the text of the username input, and all I'm going to do is just put quote, quote. In other words, just set it to be empty. Let's do another one of those for the password input. And again, set it to be just an empty string. I also want the button to change from login to try again. And then after a second, I want it to go back to login. I can use the set property block. I'm going to set the property for the login button. The property I want this time is simply the text, and I'm going to change it so that it says try again. Then I want a 1 second delay. So let's grab a set timeout block. After a second, I want it to set that property back to what it was before. So remember that when you're in block view, if you click and drag a little window like this, like that, you can actually highlight a block and you can simply Control-C to copy it. And then I'm just going to move that little black flashing cursor down to there and Control-V. And I'm going to change the login button text back to log in. So let's do one final test. So now if I run it and I type in a username and password that don't exist and click login, you can see that the username and password are deleted and we get a little message saying try again. And then it all resets so that the user can try and log in with some correct details, like Garfield. So let's move on to adding in the extra feature for the size screen. So I'm going to head up here and change this over to size. And what I want to happen here, whenever the user changes the value in this drop-down box, I want the size of the pizza to either increase or decrease. So at the moment, there isn't actually any code handling what happens when this drop-down box changes. We didn't need to do anything, but now I do. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a new on-event block, and I'm going to put it right in here. So that's before the user clicks the size button to go to the next page. Although technically, all of these on events, there is really no order to them. I could put them in any order. The app is actually constantly checking to see if any of these things are being clicked or changed. So what I'm trying to do here is check to see whether the size drop-down has been changed. So this event will trigger whenever the value in that drop-down box is changed. So from small to medium, medium to large, etc. Now, in order to be able to actually change the size of that pizza, I have to be able to select it with my code. So what I need to do now is go back to my design page, click on this pizza here, and give it an ID that I can then select with my code. So let's go ahead and call this size image. And we can see that at the moment it's 100 pixels wide and 100 pixels high. So let's head back to the code. There is actually a block in here called set size. Now I just want to show you what this does. Let's go ahead and change this to size image. And I'm just going to change it to be 200 and 200. And I'm only doing this just to illustrate what actually happens. So let's go ahead and run this and log in. You'll see that as soon as I change this to anything, it gets bigger. But the problem is it's enlarging from this top left corner here, and you can see it's kind of moved down to the right. What I wanted it to do is actually enlarge kind of from the center. Unfortunately, there is no simple way to do this. What we would actually have to do is, instead of using set size, we would have to use set position, because the set position block actually comes with X and Y coordinates as well. So as well as making this a little bit bigger, for example, like 120, I'd also have to change the X and Y coordinates to move it up a bit and left a bit. And this just becomes a bit of a headache. We could do it this way, but I'm going to show you a different way to do it, which I think is just a little bit easier. So I'm going to remove that. And what I'm now going to do is actually set up an if statement. So let's head over to if, and I'm going to grab my if and put this in here. So remember, what I'm looking for is to see if the size is small, and then if the size is medium, if the size is large, etc. So I first need to actually get the size from the drop-down box. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a variable to do this. So let's drop this up here, and I'm going to create a brand new variable called size. And I want that size variable to contain the text that we get from the size drop-down. So size is going to be small, or medium, or large, or extra large. So now I can go ahead and check to see what that size variable contains. So I'm going to grab myself an is equal to, and let's go for if size is equal to small. And what I want to do now is set the size of the pizza to be kind of its standard size before it's been enlarged. And to do this, I'm actually going to use a block that you won't find anywhere up here. We actually need to switch over to our code and type this directly in the code. So I need to make sure that I'm here inside my if statement. And the code that I need is called set style. I need 2 brackets, and then inside the brackets, I need the element that I'm trying to set the size of. So if you remember, that was size image, and then comma, a couple more quotes. This is where I put the property that I want to change, and this is the bit that's going to do the actual enlarging or shrinking of the image. What you're going to type in is this: transform, then a colon, scale, then a couple of brackets, and then inside here, a number that represents how big we want it to be. 1 is actually the starting size, the default size of the image. Now, if I go back to show blocks, you'll see that that code, even though that block doesn't exist over here, it still becomes a block. So what we can do now is enlarge this if statement so that it also checks the small, medium, and large. But incidentally, I've just noticed that I typed small with a lowercase s. That's bad, because actually the text that's in the drop-down box is uppercase. It starts with a capital letter, and that matters. That would have broken my code. All right, so to copy this, what I'm going to do is hit the little plus. That creates an else. I'm going to hit it again, because that then becomes an else if. So now what I want to do is put else if, and in here, this needs to be size is equal to medium. Now I can grab another is equal to block like this, but actually, if you just type in size, space, is equal to, that's 2 equal signs, and then a couple of quotes, capital letter, medium, it will actually automatically turn that into a little orange block like that. So if the size is equal to medium, I'm going to click and drag up to copy this, Control C, make sure that my little cursor, just use the up and down arrows here, make sure my little black cursor is there, so when I Control V, it pastes it right there. This one, so if the size is medium, I'm going to increase the size to 1.2. That's just a little bit bigger. Let's go ahead and add another else if. And again, just going to type this in. If the size is equal to, and then in quotes, large, and I'm just going to move my cursor down, Control V, because I still had that copied. So if it's large, let's set it to be 1.4. And then finally, I don't need another else if, because if they haven't chosen small and they haven't chosen medium and they haven't chosen large, the only one left means they must have selected extra large. So all I need to do here is just paste in one final set style. And if they've chosen extra large, let's make this 1.6. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. Let's log in with a known username and password. Turns green, waits a second, here we go. So now when I select these, you'll see that the image is enlarging from the center. And that's what that transform scale is actually doing. So now let's move on to the choose a topping screen. And what I want to happen here, I want there to be a little green tick next to each of these drop downs. And when the user chooses a topping, I want the little green tick to either appear or disappear if they remove the topping. So let me reset this. And what I need to do here, of course, is go and find myself an image of a tick, or a check mark, as it's also called. So I'm going to go ahead and use Google Drawing for this. And I'm going to head up here and I'm going to call it tick. And I'm just going to use the built-in image search. I'm going to type in tick mark. I'm going to put the word mark in there because Ticks, of course, are also horrible little insects that bite and suck blood and stuff. And I don't want pictures of those. So tick mark, make sure that I get these kind of things. And really any of these will do, but let's drag this in. Again, just remember that if you're setting the background to be something other than white in your app, you need to be careful to make sure that the images you're finding don't have backgrounds on. So I'm going to shrink this down because actually I don't need this to be particularly large. And let's just crop off anything that I don't need. Here we go. And so now I'm going to go to File, Download PNG. So that's now sitting in my Downloads folder. Let's go back to App Lab. And I now need to add that image in. So let's go to Design. Let's make sure that we're on the topping screen. I'm going to go ahead and drag in an image. And I'm not really worried about where it sits at the moment. Go to Choose, Upload File. I want to be in my Downloads folder. There's the tick, and then choose. Here we go. It's currently massive, so let's just shrink that down. And it's a nice size so that it looks good sat next to each of the drop-down boxes. And I think I might also shrink my drop-down boxes a little bit just so that the ticks aren't squished over here on the right-hand side. So I'm going to click that drop-down box. I'm going to go to the width, which is currently 200, and set it to, let's try 180. There we go. And that just gives me a little bit more space to put the tick next to it. So I'm just going to quickly go down my drop-down boxes and resize them and also copy my tick. There we go. And because I want to be putting code onto all of these things, I now need to make sure that all of these have got IDs. So these drop-down boxes already have IDs because I was using that on the order confirmation page. But at the moment, the ticks don't. So let's go ahead and give each of these its own ID. And I want to make sure that the ID of each tick corresponds to the drop-down box that it's sitting next to. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm just going to call this tick 1, tick 2, tick 3, and tick 4. Now, obviously, I don't want these ticks to be visible when this page loads. I want the ticks to be off the screen, and then when the user chooses a topping, I want the tick to appear. So what I'm actually going to do now, down here, there's a checkbox that you can tick to set the state of that image to be hidden. And then we'll use code to change this property, this hidden property, so that it's showing again when you choose a topping from the drop-down boxes. Okay, so let's head over to our code. Let's scroll down to the section that's all to do with our toppings. Now, as we're about to code this topping screen, this is actually a good point to fix a problem that our app currently has. Let me show you what the problem is. If I go ahead and run the app, let's just sign in. Let's just use small for the size. Let's say that the user chooses some toppings, but they leave one of the drop-down boxes on choose a topping. Maybe they only want 3 toppings. Well, the problem is, if I hit next, we can see that because these text boxes are getting their text from the drop-down boxes, if the drop-down box still says choose a topping, then that's what we get here. And the reason why it's sliced off is because the text box isn't big enough to contain all of that text. It just gets sliced off at choose a. So I would prefer it if it simply said none. So if the user leaves one of the drop-down boxes on choose a topping, then for that topping, it will just say none. So as well as getting out all our ticks to work, we're going to fix this as well. So let's reset that. We'll just head back to our topping screen. So the way we're going to do this, I'm going to scroll right up to the top of my program, and I'm actually going to create some variables to store what all the toppings are. So topping 1, and what I'm actually going to do, in quotes, is set the default value for topping 1 to simply be none. And then I'm going to drag a little window across, copy that and paste, paste, paste. This one can be topping 2. This one can be topping 3, and this one topping 4. And if I now scroll down, here where we're setting the text of the confirmation text boxes to be whatever the drop-down boxes say, I'm going to remove the 4 get text from topping drop-down boxes, and I'm going to replace those with the variables instead. Topping 1, topping 2, topping 3, topping 4. By the way, I'm hitting tab on the keyboard here to move between these different text inputs on the blocks. That's the key above caps lock on your keyboard. You can also do shift and tab to go backwards through these. So that's just a little shortcut to save you clicking all the time with the mouse. So now, by default, all of those text boxes are going to contain none. And let's just do a quick test to make sure that that works. Garfield, feed me, log in, click at small. And if I just hit next, you can see that now they all default to none. Okay, let's reset that and let's carry on. So let's handle what happens then when each of these drop-down boxes is changed, because it's that change event, remember, that is going to make the tick either show or hide. So I need to go to my UI controls, grab a new on event block. I'm going to pop it right here. I'm going to choose topping drop 1 and change. The first thing I'm going to do when the user changes one of the drop-down boxes or changes the first drop-down box, I'm actually going to set the topping 1 variable to contain the text from that drop-down box. So at this point, if they choose mushrooms, for example, mushrooms will be stored in the topping 1 variable, and then here, mushrooms will end up on that final screen. So now let's go ahead and do the code for the tick. And I'm going to use an if statement for this. And what I'm going to do is check to see if, and I could type this, I'm going to drag in an is equal to block. So I'm going to check to see if topping 1 is equal to, and I'm going to type in choose a topping. So in other words, if they change the value of this drop-down box, let's say it was already on mushrooms and they've changed their mind, so they change it back to choose a topping, what I want it to do is actually set the value of the tick to hide. So UI controls, let's go to set property, drop this in here. So I'm going to set the property of tick 1. The property I'm looking for is hidden, and I want it to be left on true. So if the drop-down box says choose a topping, I want the tick to be hidden. Okay, let's add a plus here so that we get an else. Let me just drag up and copy that. Paste it in. If they click the drop-down box and choose anything other than choose a topping, then I want the tick to be hidden false. So we're nearly there. There's one more thing that I need to do here. We have a bit of a problem because if the user does choose a topping and then changes their mind and sets the drop-down box back to choose a topping, it's actually going to overwrite this none value that we've set here with choose a topping again. So we can fix that by saying, okay, if topping 1 is equal to choose a topping, then what we actually want to do is set topping 1 back to none. So whenever they change this drop-down box back to choose a topping, that will also change the variable back to none. Now I need 4 of these on events in total. So if I just highlight, I need 4 of this, 1 for each of the drop-down boxes. So I've highlighted them. I'm going to Control C to copy, and I can just use the arrow keys to move the black cursor to the bottom of this on event block. And now I can paste, paste, and paste. And now I have to be very, very careful to make sure that each of these on events is referring to one of the specific drop-down boxes and ticks. And if you mess this up, it will stop your program working properly. So I need to make sure that this on event is happening for topping drop 2. I need to make sure that the variable that we're looking at is topping 2. And I need to make sure that the drop-down box we're getting the text from is also topping drop 2. I need to change this one to 2. Basically, anywhere where you see a number 1, 2, 3, or 4, they have to be the same. So let's keep going. This one needs to be 2. And then the ticks also have to be 2. I'm going to quickly repeat that for the 3rd and 4th drop-down boxes. Okay, I'm all done. I've made sure that each of these on events is referring to one of the specific drop-downs and ticks. So let's go ahead and test this again. So we'll choose some toppings. And then I'll go ahead and unchoose. Is that a word? Unchoose that topping. Click next. And we can see that it went back to being none. Fantastic. And now we can move on to the confirm page, because I would like the app to actually tell the user how much their pizza costs. And that price is going to be based on the size of the pizza that they've selected. So let me reset this and we'll head over to the confirm screen. And what I need to do is add 2 more labels at the bottom. I'm going to use the red and grey colours again. And basically I need one of them to be a pound sign and the other one to just kind of be empty. Well, I might just set it to 0. So let's go to design. And I'm going to just duplicate the one that I've already got here, but I will need to make this a bit bigger as well. So I want this to contain a pound sign. And for the font size, let's go for quite a bit bigger, just so it's really visible for the user. Maybe something like that. And then I'll go ahead and duplicate one of these. I'm going to set this to be the same size. And I just need to make this text box a little bit bigger as well. I'm going to set it to be 0. But of course, our code is going to change that value. And because we need to be doing something to this with code, we need to give this an ID. So I'm going to go ahead and call this confirm price. Okay, so let's head over to the code and make this work. I'm going to go into this part of my code here. This is where I'm setting the different toppings to whatever they've chosen from the drop-down boxes. And after that, I'm now going to throw in a little bit of extra code that just checks to see what the size is and then changes the price accordingly. So what I'm going to do is scroll up to the part of the code that's all to do with getting the size that the user has selected, because this is the ideal place to also set the price. What I'm going to do is head up to the top here. I'm going to create a brand new variable, which is going to be called price, which I'm initially going to set to just be empty. I can now scroll down to the part of the code where I'm checking to see what size they chose, and I can now specify what that price is going to be based on the size they've chosen. Inside here, if they've chosen size small, I'm going to be setting the price. And remember, the pound sign is already there, so all I need to type is the price, $12.99. I'm going to highlight that block, Control C. I'm going to use the arrow keys to move down and Control V to paste, and again, and again. And now I can just change the price for each one. Let's make this $13.99 and $14.99 and $15.99. And now we can scroll back down to the part where we are setting the size and all of the toppings, and we can go ahead and drop in one final set text block. And this one needs to be setting the confirm price. That's this one here, remember, the 0. And what we want to do is delete everything inside here, including the quotes, and type in price. So that will be the price variable, remember. Okay, so let's go ahead and give this a quick test. I'm going to choose extra large, so that should be $15.99. And there we go, it says $15.99. Now, just a quick point, if you find that you do this and it's only showing you like 15 or 15.9 and doesn't show you the whole price, the problem, of course, is going to be this text box. You need to make sure that you've made that text box nice and big so that it can accommodate all of that text. Right, now we're nearly finished. The final part is going to be on the order screen. So at the moment, all it does is display this screen to the user, but what I'd like it to do is to animate. So I want this pizza here to be continuously moving around in a circle. So let's look at how we do that. Let's head over to our code. We're going to be inside this last on event. So at the moment, all it does is set the screen to the very last screen, the order screen. But now we're going to make it so that that image rotates. Now in your code, whenever you want to do something continuously, then you know that you're using some kind of loop. So I'm going to go over to the control section. And in fact, the one that I want to use here is a timed loop. So let's drop that in there. So the idea here is that whatever code I put inside this loop is going to happen every 1 second in this case. And what I'm actually going to do is simply make the image rotate by 1 degree. But if I do that every second, it's going to go very, very, very slowly. So let's make it repeat this code every 50 milliseconds instead. And what I now need to do is create a variable. I'm going to put outside the loop, so above the loop, and I'm going to call this degrees, and I'm going to set it to be 1. Now, inside the loop, I'm going to use that same method that I used to make the pizza bigger and smaller. So I'm going to go over to show text, and to make the spinning work, you kind of just need to type out what I type out and to trust me that it's going to work. So what I'm going to do is type set style, a couple of brackets, and then in quotes, the thing that we're trying to rotate. So let's just go back to the design page and click on that pizza. So I've called mine spinning pizza. If you haven't given yours an ID yet, then go ahead and give it an ID now. Okay, so back to my code. So I'm going to set the style of spinning pizza, comma, quote, transform, colon, rotate, and then open a bracket. Now I need to go after that quote, space, plus. Now I'm going to put that variable that I just created, degrees, plus, and then in quotes, DEG, bracket, and then right at the end, a semicolon. Now I know that looks complicated, and if you really want to understand how that actually works, you'd have to spend a bit of time learning about how websites are made, and the language CSS, which is used to style websites. This app, although we're creating it inside App Lab, is actually technically just a small website. Anyway, there's one final part that I need to do here. Inside this loop, I need to make sure that the degrees variable goes up by 1, plus equals 1 as well. So if I pop that back over to show blocks, you'll see that it's quite happy to turn all of that into block code. Let's do one final test. I'm going to click run, and we'll log in. Use ourselves a size of pizza. Go for mushrooms, onions, tomatoes, and gotta have pineapple. Okay, $14.99. Click order, and there you go. We can see that our pizza is rotating. And that's it. That is your finished pizza ordering app.